So it's Friday, the 7th of May. It's just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm here in Gweedore in northwest Donegal, and Liamog is my name, and I'm associated with a men's shed here called Skibole Navarre in Gweedore. Skibole would be the Irish name for a buyer, so it probably defines us well. And I'm joined by Paul Nagle from Wales. So Paul, maybe you tell us a little about yourself.
Yep, my name is Paul Nagle, and I'm based in the Rhondda Valley in South Wales. I've been involved in the shed movement since about 2012, and have supported the opening of 9 such shed facilities over the last 10 years or so. And I work for a social enterprise called Shednet, which stands for Shed Network.
All right. So, and I think, Paul, just to say you and I met probably sometime back in January this year, when there was an initiative out there to see if the possibility of a Zoom network of men's sheds anywhere on the planet. And there was a couple of meetings. It was probably up to about 47 people, I think, joined from as far as wide as Australia, in through the States, a couple through England, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. And it was like, for me, it was just wonderful meeting like-minded individuals. And the common theme I felt was that, particularly because of COVID, trying to hold the community of sheds, both in shed members themselves together and into communication within other sheds. So I think, Paul, at the time, I think when I met you first, you were talking about there's a sort of a network of some 10 or 12 sheds in the area that you're involved in, is it?
Yes, that's right. I've worked in the social enterprise sector for about 25 years, and I know that working together, partnerships, networking is a good way to share resources, to learn from each other. So I'm a great believer in networking. Sheds around here are opening up, but they're kind of on their own. And so the way I wanted to help sheds was in a supportive, working together way. So hence we came up with the shed network idea. And also it was driven by the fact that we do have in Wales a thing called Men's Sheds Cymru. But Men's Sheds Cymru was supposed to be the voice of sheds across Wales. We're tasked with setting up a Men's Sheds Association, where the association was led by the shedders themselves. It would be an organisation with shed management team, and if they wanted to hire staff, they could do so. But since 2012, since they've been funding, they have failed to set that up. And even yesterday, I had a meeting with them, and they still tell me that it's not a priority of theirs to set up an association across Wales. And so there's a gap, which to some extent, around the heads of the valleys areas where I work, I'm trying to fill.
Yeah, so I mean, back in January when I just reached out and said, put anywhere I could on the internet, particularly through Facebook, I just put up a flyer and say, look, anybody like to meet up and chat. So there was no prescription around at all why we would get together, and there was no sort of rules of membership or anything. I just said, I had a sense, as I've always felt, that once I visited sheds or just arrived, it all seemed to make sense the minute I was there. And every one of you guys whom I've met have all been generous, welcoming, enthusiastic, curious, engaged. I said, geez, I want to be around guys like that. That's what I want to be doing. I do realise that in all the places, the countries in which we're located, including some chap I met from Canada, that there's a sort of a parallel experience in every country where there's sort of, let's say, an officialdom of association of sheds, and then there's some organic activity on the cold face of what's happening. So, I mean, my interest in this aspect was driven by the fact that, we're a year and 2 or 3 months now into COVID lockdown and yo-yo lockdowns. And the interesting thing is, whether it be in Australia, Brazil, America, England, Ireland, all of us have had one singular experience, that's physical separation and social isolation. That's been a common trait, and the thing that which kept guys together, the idea of being able to go down, meet up in a shed, have a bit of fun, a chat, do whatever sheds do, lots of things. That's been removed from us. And we've been living very isolated existences in our homes. And Mary, my woman, and I, we've been, for the last 6-7 months, trying to work with people anywhere we can to promote the skill sets to use Zoom. As we said, the idea would be that people could use Zoom, and we just picked Zoom as an example. It could be Microsoft Teams or WebEx or Google Meets, but they could use it with the same level of ease and facility that they used to be able to use an old dial-up phone in the home, just to chat with people. It was just the formality, and that everything that would flow from that would be a bonus, but the chat was what was central. So out of those early meetings then, what started to happen, Paul, was numbers of different sheds were starting to host Zoom meetings in their own sheds and then opening them up as open invites for external people. And then one of the guys, Dan Gamay from Sheds Sans Frontier, Dan took the trouble of trying to say, well, why don't we lay out a schedule of when meetings take place so that if you wanted to drop in, that's we go. So where I then followed up with you, Paul, was where John Rushford and Derek Pryor up in the Nairn Shed in Scotland. That's where I met you one day. Yes. And I just knew your accent was like mine. It was out of place in the Scottish Highlands, you know.
Yeah, well, the same thing happened to me. I had known Nathan Serra, who was also one of the people who set up Sheds Sans Frontier, right, with Dan. From about 6 years ago, and I'd actually visited his shed up in North Wales, so I was aware of Nathan. And when I heard about that opportunity for sheds across the globe to meet, that's exactly the sort of thing I wanted to get involved in. So like yourself, I started to go to some of the shed which he advertised on the site. I think the first one was the Nairn Shed with John. We went to the Blaen y Gwen shed. I have been to a shed once. It's you know, a bottom line at the moment. I'm going from a year and 3 months to not doing one Zoom meeting to about 12 hours a week. So it's difficult to get to all the sheds. But I like the idea. And one of the things I'm slightly concerned at the moment now, because we are coming out of lockdown, is that these people may not hold their meetings, and therefore there won't be an opportunity to contact with people from around the globe. When I set up our Zoom meeting, the first thing I did was to set up a website called the Shed Online, because my concern was to keep all our 9 sheds together so that when we could open up, we would still have had contact over the period. I didn't expect it to be as long as this, and we'd all be together and then ready to go back to the sheds when the day came, you know. But I also like the idea of meeting people like yourself and John and Dan, and I'm hoping that will go on, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. What we were doing, we started this idea maybe last October, and we started initially, there were a number of sheds. So I live in northwest of Ireland in a county called Donegal. It's quite an extensive county. It seems to me to be probably the second biggest one in Ireland. Long distances. There are something in the region of 20 to 25 sheds somewhere in existence in Donegal. And there was a body called the Donegal Men's Sheds Network. But I mean, it seemed to me that it neither thought the word network was either a verb or a noun, because it didn't do much of either. And part of that is over the years. I mean, you know, maybe 15 or 20 guys gathered at shed in a local shed, and they're happy doing their own thing. They're not trying to split the atom or join the universe together. So it's very hard for men in sheds typically to find a reason why would we bother networking. Now, when COVID happened, of course, we were all so isolated, then we couldn't do so. And the skill sets of using these type of technologies was pretty low. The level of apprehension and resistance among many men, and okay, so you'd say of an age group of maybe 50, 55 upwards, but in our shed, lots of guys under 50 years of age, not used to it, feeling uncomfortable being on screen, you know, not trusting how this thing would work out, etc., not really seeing a reason for it. So what we started to do, we offered voluntary training for sheds, and a number of guys in Donegal picked up. There was about 20 people picked up in it initially. Then one of the sheds south of ours in Ardara decided they would have enough people, so we worked with 8 of them, And we brought them up over a sort of 4-session period to have a competency. And then we started doing that with other sheds. And then through the meeting we had in the network, we met, say, Graham down in and Tony down in Winchester. So we said, we'll train your guys. And then we met Tony Rainburn up in Norwich, I think it was. And then we did training with them. Then we met some guys in Wexford in Ireland. We did training with them. And all of those proved extremely successful. And then this idea of what's called a tea and chat session. So what we presently do, Paul, is our shed effectively hosts a tea and chat session on a Monday and a Friday from 10:30 in the morning until 12 noon. And in fact, one of those days was a day which overlapped with what you guys were doing. And so it was obvious that we were envisioning like that with Jan Gamai, that imagine throughout the world there was loads of meetings on at all times. And because Australia works 12 hours away from us, even in the middle of the night, you might say, I'll go here to visit these guys, and with the recognition that as anytime I visited, she had been made particularly welcome. And for that period, it's been a very powerful social connector, I think, Paul. Yeah.
Well, after joining the Nain Shed one with John, he suggested to me that we do a tea and coffee chat session as well. So I did set one up for a while on a Monday. We had a few people come along, but the way that we work is slightly different. We have regular Zoom meetings of the people who are part of our shed network. We have a poetry group. We have a Friends of the Mid group, which is trying to set up a new shed. We have a Silver Productions group. We have the Dewey Sant Management Shed group. So we've got a number of different meetings throughout the week of the people who are in our network who want to come on our network, and so they get a chance to meet anyway. So I found that the tea and chat meeting was sort of redundant because they were meeting anyway.
Yes,
we did occasionally have someone from outside join in, but I found that to a certain degree an embarrassment. If you only had a couple of people there and someone like yourself came in, you think, well, there's not much going on down there. So in the end, for the time being, we've stopped that. And so all of our Zoom meetings, which are still continuing, and we're thinking of opening up a book club shortly, a heritage group shortly. We're going to do a quiz. So we are bringing more activity-based Zoom meetings online, and people will choose to come to the ones they want, which also gives them a chance to link with people and chat anyway. So I don't know if the tea and chat will come back. We'll have to wait and see, but it wasn't working for us.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was extremely impressed when you opened my mind up to the idea of thematic-based meetings. So, let's say someone was into model railway stuff, like there's guys all over the world, and sure, so we would term them into the concept of communities of interest. Yeah. So communities of common interest where, let's say somebody was into renovating antique cars, maybe other fellas are into wood turning or whatever. That would give them a sense of purpose as to why. And I think that's been a fantastic idea. And I see, like, the reason for the suggestion to have this recorded conversation with you, which we try and distribute it out through anybody who's interested in Mensid, is to map out the potentials and opportunities and ideas. So I think that idea of having thematic based meetings where people from out the world can drop in, but they've got common language. You know what I mean? It's fantastic. Then if we look at how our thing has evolved, our identity was around literally, I suppose, addressing initially social isolation, just the sense that we hope that some of our own guys in sheds who have not been able to come down to the shed, because lots of our people, we're all of an age. Some of us have pulmonary issues. Some people have physical ailments. Some people have the institutionalization of isolation has kicked in. The people are so stuck at home, they're afraid to go out. But we also felt that there were other men in the community who maybe traditionally wouldn't go down to sheds. They wouldn't go physically to a shed. And maybe we might ensnare and capture, invite, encourage other people in. And that's been interesting. And then the other thing is that I would have sent this information to anybody and everybody. So we have all sorts of characters coming in. And what's interesting, one day we had 45 people. And then it becomes, how do you organize 45 people? Because it's not a lecture, it's a chit chat. So the vision here is that it's a little bit like if you went into a canteen. There might be room at a table for 6 or 7 people. And once you come in and there's 6 or 7 people there, you just move on to another table, it spills over there. So using the magical feature of Zoom breakout rooms, we tend to work in groups of, say, once we get to 6 or 7, I open up another room and people go in there. And what we found is that number 6 or 7 is the perfect number to, you don't feel the spotlight's on you if you're quiet. And at the same time, there's room to be included in the conversation. The difference being that we have no idea what we'll talk about on a day. Today, I said to you this morning, I had the unusual experience yesterday of driving to Derry in Northern Ireland. Mary had to go for a dental appointment. And on our way, we were present at a bereavement funeral, which was taking place in Dublin through the internet. And it really struck me, driving in the countryside, listen to this sort of choral music or whatever, and quietness, and the messages about bereavement. It was really impactful stuff, really so. And so we started this morning's conversation on that. And as I said to you earlier, next minute there's tall stories and tales being told of wakes and funerals and fairies and fellas arising from the dead. And one fellow was telling us about a situation where, and it was always in the old days, where a corpse was frozen up, all bent up with the knees bent up, and somebody came in and used a big lump hammer and broke the legs to put them into the coffin. I mean, it was really wild. But I think the possibilities here are endless, Paul. Your magical idea of structured interest-based groups. And then we have this just social tea and a chat. And then there's a whole other area of administrative organized shed organization. And there's the whole idea of online learning and teaching, etc. So it's a powerful environment, yeah? Yeah,
and one of the things we found, when you, and I was the one who was leading on all of this, right? A year and a half ago, I had never made a website, for instance, right? But I decided all our sheds are shut. I thought, well, how am I going to support my people while this goes on, sort of thing? So I thought, well, we set up a website, which we have called the Shed Online. But then I had to learn all about that. So to learn how to do the website. Then we had to think about what content, what's going to go on there. Zoom did come in later on, but it wasn't, I'd never done Zoom up then, so it didn't immediately come to mind. What I did, first of all, we'd had a poetry group in the real world, so we set up a poetry group. We had some volunteers before, so we set up a volunteer group. So we really tried to mimic online what was happening in the world. We couldn't do our walking rugby, obviously. So that kind of stopped. Gardening was a bit more difficult. We put some videos on how to do gardening online, but it's not, it's not really doing gardening. So it started that way. And I was leading on all the Zoom meetings. Now, as you talked about the admin of all of this, the more activities you try to run, and we want to open up more, it would be impossible really for one person to facilitate them all. And to even have enough knowledge of them all. So then we came up with the idea of volunteer digital ambassadors. That's what I decided to call them.
Yeah,
volunteers.
When you heard, I just think that word again, volunteer digital ambassadors. When I heard you mention that word a number of weeks ago, I was really captivated. I think it's fantastic because we're dealing with a world our world has been shattered. What was normal in the past will no longer be normal, and people are reeling with that. And the danger is if people feel pressurized, stressed, or coerced to use this technology, and they're naturally apprehensive, resistant, doesn't work. But I love the idea of a digital ambassador. Like I can see it in the Premier League where you get ex-super footballers and they act as ambassadors. Like Kenny Dalglish is an ambassador for Liverpool, or Brian Robson is an ambassador for Man United or something. I think they're powerful ideas. So tell us a bit more about how this digital ambassador concept works, Paul, will you?
Yeah, I did not want to take the chance of supporting my volunteers, going to face-to-face meetings with people, which is what we did before COVID, of course, right? Because I couldn't live with the fact that somebody got ill while doing that. I couldn't live with that. So I thought, right, we're going to have to do everything remotely. So I thought, right, okay, we've got some volunteers and we'll get some new volunteers and we'll do it online. So we come up with the idea, and the ambassador is someone is to promote the idea of sheds to people and get them engaged, of course. So we got the group together. We had 10 in all. We currently got 7. So we have 10 volunteer ambassadors. We meet on a bi-weekly meeting where we would train up and support the volunteers in the conference to use. Zoom has become a leading thing now, by the way, right? So we meet on Zoom, we talk on Zoom, they get training on ICT, whatever training they feel they need. They do some befriending, because just the very nature of linking up with someone is a befriending them. So we give them ICT skills, we give them confidence building skills. Some people don't like being on screen, so bit by bit you just build up the conference by just meeting local people first of all. And so they then go off and the one runs the poetry group, for instance, one runs the silver protection group, one is going to do the book club shortly, they're working at the moment, one's going to do the quiz. So we support the volunteers who then lead on, and they normally about 1 hour a week or the quiz will be 1 a month, an hourly meeting based around Zoom where people come in and they just facilitate it. Everybody gets a chance to join in. And if you take the poetry, for instance, the way that works is each one of the poets there will say, okay, next week I'll read up on Dylan Thomas and I'll do a presentation on Dylan Thomas. And then week after, somebody else will say, well, I'll do Oscar Wilde. So they'll go off and research Oscar Wilde, they do it. We all write our poems, we present our poems. Some of us now are using ICT to make little videos of the poem, So it's really, because one person can't do all of this, it's supporting individuals who've got interest. They tend to lead on the things they're interested in. So if you're interested in poetry, you'll become the volunteer digital ambassador for poetry, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that when we spoke before about the idea of where the buy-in comes from, it's easy to put effort into something which you're passionate about. And as you said, if you can identify a reason why people would, I'm into, let's say I was into fishing. So it'd be very easy for me to talk to other fellas about fishing. I mean, the work that we were doing back in December, January and February, I suppose was preemptive work in that space, because we had to try and get to the point, how do you get people to the point that they're able to use Zoom effectively enough to then be able to enjoy their passion? Now, one of the things we worked on is because something I've been passionate about is there's an Irish word called Nagle. Just like it's like a flat metal. It's Nagle, but it relates to an Irish tradition where Irish people would go and they would cut a bank of turf together as a group for one particular family. The next week they do it. So they collaborate on different projects, and there's no fee passes hands. It's not done on that basis. But the other thing is I've done a lot of academic research on Nagle as a change management tool. And one of the features of it is it's non-hierarchical in its basis. It's extremely agile and responsive to various disturbances in the equilibrium. And the other thing is that the leadership of a Nagle generally tends to follow whoever has the particular energy and solution at that time. So a lot of the struggles that happen in response to, say, COVID has been bureaucratic top-down management styles which prevent new ideas breaking forward. And an example of this has been when we did our training, we would work with maybe 8 to 9 people at a time. Now, many of these people had never seen a keyboard, so I was really struggling in this area. But once we got into breakout rooms, we were able to break people out into 2 and 3 people in a room. And then they could get really individualized attention. But what started to happen was once we did a bit of training with some guys in sheds, people from those sheds joined us because we're all remote anyway. And then we in our shed, plus a few people from different sheds would visit another shed like Tony Rainburn over in England. And I mean, so numbers of people from different sheds got together to help a new shed. So even that collaboration, I thought, was fantastic. And I suppose what's happening for us is we're benefiting from the fact that people we've met on those journeys drop in every now and then. But we have talked, and that's a recent thing, we're coming into the bright days of the year in this hemisphere. Obviously in Australia, we're at the other side of that. And the question is, as the post-vaccination COVID offers the potential of a more relaxed physical interaction, what will happen with this technology in this space? I mean, that was one of the thoughts. So what's your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, I'm the same as you, really. Right from the beginning, I believe that this has got legs and will continue into the future. That's the first thing I'd say, right? How we will continue, I'll try and explain in a second. But in terms of the groups we currently have, we take our poetry group. This Tuesday, we're going back out into the real world. We've got a room in a local library. We can take up to 10 people there. We've got 7 in the group. So we go in there because that's what people want to do. They actually want to go. They still want to do poetry. That's the driving force. That's why they come there. But they'd rather be together in a room and discussing it. So the poetry now, instead of being online, will be in the library. So it could be that then it will not be on Zoom anymore. I'm not sure yet, The others, like the digital storytelling group, Silver Productions. The people who are in there have learned how to make little films and make them all sorts of things. But we work collaboratively. So it's quite easy to make a film together over a Zoom meeting. We talk about things. If we want people to do audios, we send them a script and they make the script. We send them the pictures they want. We go and film them individually. We bring it all together. So it makes a lot of sense, really, to keep these storytelling group together online because we've all got our own equipment. We can do it at an end, The walk-in rugby group, which has started, 20 people turn up, obviously is back in the real world. It was never online, of course. But so there is no doubt that the Zoom meetings will reduce, I would say, in some areas. However, from our point of view, of the 250 people who were in our 9 sheds before we opened up, only 50 of them came to our shed online or came to our Zoom meetings. So you're talking about the major percentage of people not coming online for whatever reason, okay? And so what we're doing with the new project we've got at the moment is to train people to teach people to be digital inclusion officers, we call them. So it's part of the ambassador scheme, but they will be taught how to, we've got tablets, phablets we've got really, which is a mixture of a phone and a mobile tablet. We will be giving people these equipment with just some simple apps on, mainly Zoom, because social interaction is the main driving force for me to start with. They'll be taken to home, given to the person. They'll be allocated a volunteer, and that volunteer will work with that person on a weekly basis, 1 or 2 meetings a week, whatever they want to do. And first of all, just chatting and talking about whatever they talk about and trying to teach them the basic skills to be able to handle a Zoom meeting. And then bit by bit, as the conference grows, we maybe try to give them an email, maybe try to get them to do a bit of shopping online, maybe do online banking, to get in touch with a council, to pay the council tax, whatever it is each individual wants. Everything is individually needs-based driven, really. So, sure. And some of our people have got early stage dementia, for instance, and they've got physical illnesses. So they can't physically come to do gardening or come to the places we do things. So they will be in a home. We're also linking up. We've been asked to go into a care home. So they wouldn't be coming out to a shed. So I can see what we're going to do with it is we will put ICT into our sheds. So the people who come to the sheds can meet physically and do their woodwork, their garden, whatever they're doing. But the people who can't come can link up on that morning via a Zoom meeting, for instance. So they can have a chat with the people, Then the care home, they've nearly all been given computers, so they can start linking up as a group and doing things that way. People who are housebound totally can link in again. So if they can go to a shed as the dementia progresses, they can't come to a shed anymore, but they can still link with the people. So I think the ICT within sheds has definitely got legs. But of course, the people who can get out and get back to the real world, that's what they'll do.
Yeah. Do you have that phablet there with you by any chance? Do you? You showed it to me the other day at a meeting. I'm very impressed. But very impressed that. So I think, Paul, you were talking about maybe having a group of 10 of these, just again for any viewers, and that they would be preloaded with specific usable applications, such as Zoom, for example. And this emulates on something what we had done along with a company called the Donegal Local Development Company, who had provided 10 Galaxy phones. So in our project, we had 10 little phones, and then we did something similar. But as you say, Paul, it's about 10 by 8. It's about the size. Like, for example, I have a an iPad there. So it's quite similar in size, Paul, to the sort. But the price, I mean, was very interesting. You said it was about £83.
Yeah, we had a budget of £150 per person.
Yeah.
And that's to give them the piece of equipment, plus to get them on the internet if they haven't got Wi-Fi in their home. So by spending £83 on that, which is 3G, if you want to go to 4G, it'll cost you a bit more. But with the level of people we are working with, this is significant. We are piloting it. It's early stages. If it doesn't work, of course.
So just to say, Paul, that you put a SIM card into that and you pay a deal-only SIM.
I pay £20 a month for unlimited data. I was just about £10 in a month, but if they go over it then, because they're on Facebook or bring down a movie or whatever. So anyway, by £20 a month, it's unlimited. So over 3 months, it costs £60 for the data.
For the data, yeah.
For that, that's hit my budget. And the idea is that they have it for 3 months. They support it with volunteer support help to get used to it. We support the volunteers. After the 3 months, if they want to keep it, they can buy it off us for the cost to us, and they can keep it. And we show them how to, buy this, top up the SIM and so forth. If they don't want, they give it back to us. We clean it all up, and then we'll give it to somebody else. So that sort of brings in a bit of sustainability to it as well.
Yeah. So I mean, again, back in February this year, in conjunction with a company here called the Donegal Local Development Company, who are essentially a taxpayer spin-off of the county council, but they say their business model is based on social inclusion. So we developed a relationship with them where they provided 10 Samsung Galaxy A12 phones or something, costing about 150 quid each. And they preloaded them with SIM cards. And similarly, we would reset the home screen. So they only had Zoom, WhatsApp, a speed test, and YouTube on them. And it proved extremely successful. Like in our shed, for example, at the 5th of February this year, when we got the phones, we had 3 people who were competent to use Zoom. On the 4th of March, which was just under a month later, we successfully held a proper AGM online through Zoom. And we had 14 participants, which was really the mass of who we had. But we ran a proper structured AGM, and there was recorded in Zoom, and it was then posted in YouTube as what I would call the compliance standard of the future. In other words, it's a totally open, transparent process. So I love the idea because, as I say, if I compare a phone like this, the limitation of is its screen size. If I then compared that, for example, to Big Brother, it's a lot bigger. And we're at a stage now, we've approached this company again to say that we now have a second stream of maybe a half dozen guys who have seen how the first crew got over it and are, let's say, a little less resistant, a little more willing. And what we feel is we really need to give them these tools for maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Like you said, a couple of months, let them settle in. But we think the effect will be massive. That's why I love this idea you have of a digital inclusion officer, a digital ambassador. But just to say, Paul, that I was mindful when I came across you first that there seemed to be in Wales a sort of a global bureaucratic willingness to support the digital awareness and the digital transformation of the community in large. And you mentioned to me that this is embedded in a particular piece of legislation. So do you want to maybe help? Because that's been very important, you feel.
Yes, definitely. I'm not fighting against anything here. The powers out there, I don't have the resources. I might have to drive some ideas, but I don't have the resources, so I need the support from somebody else. But in Wales, it started, I believe, about 5 or 6 years ago with a document called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Okay. So that's
again the Well-being of Future Generations Act. Okay. And just can I ask, where is that passed? Is that in the British Parliament? I don't know how you're.
The Welsh government.
Okay.
Assembly.
All right. Yeah. So it's specific to Wales. Right, okay.
Wales document, yeah, right. And to be fair, they claim they lead in a number of different areas like the environment and things like this, But anyway, the act itself has got 7 different themes, which I wouldn't be able to reel it off.
Okay,
it's really about building a sustainable future for young people. That's what it's really about in there, right? And within that, one of the things, obviously, is health and well-being, obviously. Loneliness and isolation and the detrimental effects that can have on people is big in there. And the digital agenda was big anyway. But with COVID, it's increased. It's
Sure, yeah.
become more important, and they have a target. The Welsh government have a target, and a lot of this stuff has to be put in law by the local councils, become statutory, right? So it's not like things, that sounds fancy, be given to it. Some things they've got to do, the local authority, whether they like it or not. And so they have to support people to get online. There's a statement in Wales that 100% of people will be online in Wales by whatever.
Wow.
Now, some of that will happen because older people pass away who were not online, then the younger people are already online. So it kind of will happen, I think, without any push in some ways, but they are pushing it and they're very supportive. They don't want anybody left behind now. They want people online now. So the local authorities across Wales, they've got a sort of get online group, like in essence, Rhondda, Cynnon Taff, get online. Right? And these are the players who are able to help people get online. Housing associations, health care workers, primary care people, the councils, third sector organisations. They meet on a bi-monthly period where they sit down and think, right, what can we do to get people online? So in terms of and what are the problems? One of the problems is equipment, right? So libraries can lend you equipment, for instance. Housing associations can give their resident equipment. Care home can give equipment. Third sector can apply for money to get equipment. So the first thing is, well, get the equipment. Then when you get the equipment, where's the infrastructure to support people? They've got have you heard of Connect in Scotland?
No, I haven't. Connecting Scotland is something similar there, is there?
Yeah, it's something similar. Yeah, and they actually, the Welsh government's referenced them as being the leaders in some ways. Like, they've got an ambassador scheme as well. Okay, where they are ambassadors. Normally, people who are working in the public sector who might give up an hour of the week to help somebody get online. Okay, I can't do that because we don't have the staff, so I've got to have volunteers to do it. So mine is similar in that, and one of the problems, if the library gives you a device to do something, read a book or whatever you want to do, there is no support for that person. They have the device, they go away for 2 or 3 weeks, but there's no one helping them, Yeah. So with our scheme, I think you've got to have the support as well as the device, haven't you? And then, of course, you've got to get access to the internet. So you've got to be able to sort that out. All of the issues need to be sorted out. But as you said, Liam, the willingness is there at all levels of government and within the public sector to help people to get online.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm not fighting any battles here. I just have to come up with an idea. I'm concentrating on the shed community. That's my little part of the world. I'm trying to put a project in place that any other shed anywhere in the world could look at and do the same things. And if there was a problem in buying equipment, one of the things we're doing at the moment is trying to get people to give us tablets and give us phones and give us laptops so we can clean them up and, recycle the equipment then, if you like, So it can be done without any money at all. I'm a social entrepreneur, so I try to get money to pay people to lead on things, Just having if you're just a volunteer run thing, if something happened to that volunteer, or you can't expect miracles of a volunteer, can you? And this has to be done on a constant basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I just a couple of years ago, I was reading stuff by a guy called Dewey, who'd be quite famous in the organizational management, the development stuff, and he talked about the importance of the championing an idea at a top level, that you really need someone with leverage in a meaningful space to make these initiatives happen. So my own reflection on how it's been in Ireland, I would be extremely critical of the Irish response to COVID in terms of the bureaucratic failure. I mean, in 2000 in Ireland, our government had set out statements of the digitisation process. I mean, there are endless documents going back to 2000 claiming that all of government documentation, etc., would be available online. And this has been treated as a joke. I myself worked as a lecturer in third level education, and I retired in early retirement in 2009. And I would have been extremely frustrated at the time of the dogmatic failure to prevent the possibility of actually online intercommunication. So then we get to COVID, the response is delayed. The second thing is, I certainly in the work we've done, I mean, we've been running, at the start of COVID, we ran 63 nights of online sing-songs to help people get over the fear that we were all going through back in March 2020. And any time we ever approach anybody in the bureaucratic administrative structures, They seemed more concerned with their annoyance that we were coming up with an idea that they were still formulating in their minds. And they wanted everybody to slow down until everybody in the country was dead before they did anything. And so, I was really fascinated. See, what's happened in Wales is, it appears to me, that everybody's faced in the same direction. So, for example, in February this year, Mary and I decided to try and establish this initiative. It was called Zoom for All in Donegal. Zoom for All in Donegal. And we set the mission that by the 1st of February 2022, which is still a long way away, everybody in Donegal, that's 160,000 people, would have this competency to be able to use Zoom as they used to use their phones if they so wished. So there was giving them the opportunity, not coercing them. And the problem is, when we met the system, it kept telling us why we couldn't do it. And I was breaking it down. I said, 160 people, you do the analysis of the generations. There are 2,500, but 25,000 of these are under 20, right? There are 50 or 60,000 people between 20 and 50 years of age. And all of these are naturally digitally competent. And we're in it, if each person between 20 and 45 adopted one person who was older than them, just one person in their extended family or community, the problem will be resolved overnight. And the other thing is that the statistics in Ireland show that 97% of people in Ireland, according to the National Broadcaster statistics, have access to a smartphone since 2019. So I believe these authorities were trying to solve the problem by teaching people Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and Microsoft Excel, because they came from office environments where the point you've stressed is this is about creating social interaction. What you do with your tablet, you just want people to chat. If as a result of this, they develop other interests, because you've got the tool to chat with them, then you can help them. So I think this message, Paul, that again, it's called the Wellbeing Future in Future Generations Act, is so vital because it's an act. It gives everybody when you're not, as you said, you're not fighting against something, you're supporting the dedication of the government to go forward. And I just hope for anybody watching this, in whatever country, I think there's lots of leadership, and you call it Digital Connect in Scotland. Is that it?
Connect in Scotland, I think. So I'll send you the link anyway.
Brilliant.
I read quite a lot of it, and a lot of them, when I would put in our project, because we were signposted to it by the Welsh government, to be fair.
Yes,
they're doing some of this, see what they're doing, and see if we can do it in Wales. They want that. They think they're ahead of us at the moment. I don't know if that's true, because I've only read a document, right? I don't know what's happening in the real world, but they are saying that's what we want in Wales. And so I come up with something, I put in for funding, and I've got 2 lots of funding, about £50,000 worth of funding over the last 6 months to develop the Shed Online, to develop the digital ambassadors, and now over the next 6 months to find a way to get people who are not online. So, I've never found it so easy to get money, to be honest with you. It's not really a struggle.
Yeah, but Paul, from the online meetings that we often had, there's a lot of guys it seems to me that those movers and shakers and volunteer efforts throughout the world, throughout COVID, have been holding sheds together, that when they meet this negative bureaucracy and difficulties to get funding, they're really on their last legs in terms of motivation. So it's wonderful to hear of this innovation there. And again, I'm delighted it came, and we'll wrap this up in a few minutes, but I'm delighted we got together this, because when we meet as a group, firstly, if you ask everybody for their permission to record, in some way, it sort of closes down the conversation. People are worried about what they're going to say, how they're going to appear. And I felt that what you had to offer and the initiatives that you're doing, and even I'm hoping that, say, in Ireland, public servants whose job it is to do this, Jesus, as public servants, you're paid money. What are you doing? Sorry, that's my frustration. But I'm saying I hope that they'll look at what you're doing and say the ease with which once you lubricate the motivation that already exists within the voluntary sector, once you stop trying to control it and you try and support it, and as you by putting that, pinning that in an act, by giving it statutory basis, it's shocking that in Ireland, the Irish Men's Shed Association would have tried to block what the efforts that we're trying to make with Zoom, because their claim is that I was pushing too much Zoom. And I'm just thinking, like, what planet are these people on? And we're in the wrong conversation. Like, what I've decided in all our work is that we work with whoever is wanting to go forward. I mean, meeting you, for me, even that information, that concept of a digital ambassador, what you've shown me with the phablets, guys down in the Isle of Wight show me similar things they've done with smaller tablets. The guys we worked with Winchester, who decided not only to take members of their sheds, but others in the community who are remotely interested. We brought them in. When we have training programs, we invite women in, men in. Like, this is not an exclusive process. It's anyone who's interested, let's get together. And my firm belief is that, like, the idea of men's sheds should be to support men in their own sheds to do whatever they want, but to create a network where they can meet lots of people with coincidental interests, like these communities of interest. Like, you could have international poetry groups, you could have international groups on wood turning, you could have international groups on programming little Raspberry Tris or Arduinos, or people playing music together, whatever. And this doesn't take from the magic of the physical shed. And in future times, hopefully, it'll even open up the opportunity that maybe, like, I have an idea I'd love to play around with the twinning of sheds across countries. I think that could be a magical experience, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, the shedders, our shedders who have joined other groups, have always enjoyed meeting people from other parts of the world. It's something that, you know, talking to Irish people, talking to Scottish people, talking to American people. It doesn't happen every day, do it? In terms of our local sheds and meeting the people, yes, we do want to go and meet and have a chat and socialize. That's where it came from. But we are a number of us, and I'm one of them, love talking to people like you and love talking to people like John, seeing what they're up to. You know, it gives ideas how we can all develop a shed and how we can make it better for people. And I think that our sheds will definitely have IT in the future, and people have the opportunity to learn while they're at the shed if they want to. If they just want to do woodwork, that's fine. But if they do want to learn how to do a Zoom meeting, they'll be able to go onto the computer there, we'll set it up, they can talk to somebody. And what I found is, if you take someone like Dave Edwards, I don't know if you've ever met Dave?
No.
Yeah, Dave Edwards is an ex-reporter of the Rhondda Leader. He was main reporter for about 30 years. And of course, when he lost his job, he lost a reason for living in some ways. It's not that dramatic, I must say.
Sure, yeah.
He was contacted to everybody, he was out telling stories. He was an important man in the local community, you know, and he lost it, and he went down a bit on it, right? And he came to the physical shed, the gardening shed. That's where I met him, but that closed, so we couldn't do the gardening. He joined us online. He'd never done Zoom. He's now an expert on Zoom. He'd never known how to make films. He made about 10 films now, you know. He goes back to his stories from the Rhondda Leader, and he puts together the film and he puts it up online. It's all up on the YouTube.
Brilliant, yeah.
And you can look at it, for instance, you know. And every week, when we meet weekly, this group, and he's always made a film ready to show, and he can't wait to do it. He loves it, you know, and it's given him, and he got his wife in there. His wife does the voiceovers and stuff in different parts, you know. So he's massively enhanced his life. He's upgraded his skills. He's obviously kept communicating with people. He's now been asked by Men's Sheds Cymru to start doing some work for them. You know?
Brilliant.
So, and that's just one story. I could go on, as we all could go on. It's really, in the end, it's all about, well, so what's the impact on the people? If there wasn't any impact on people, I wouldn't bother. But there is impact on people. I could go on for days and tell you about that. But
well, the other thing, Paul, though, it strikes me that for me, since reaching out in the start of January to those sheds throughout and the people I've met on the journey, I mean, personally for me, that I realized that a year into COVID, I too was suffering from the institutionalization of my isolation. And I'm a positive person generally, and I'm very curious, and I'm easy. Like, there's a million things I have to do. You can see the mess behind me, all my toys. But I was losing a lot of motivation and heart with all the bureaucracy and the negativity. And I have to say that meeting guys like you and John and Graham and Derek and Tony and, you know, Colin Sweeney in our local area here, Mick Malloy and others, and Tom Connery down in Wexford. I mean, it has lifted my heart. So as well as that, like, you're coming back to the well of positive people who are doing admirable things. And so this is the other aspect of keeping in contact, that you know, it's very lonely in the fucking desert. You know what I mean? It's nice to meet someone else in an oasis every now and then, you know.
Yeah.
So look at, I'm delighted.
Just to finish off, Liam, the other thing that will happen, I can assure you, is when the world changes, I'm coming around to visit nearly all of you guys.
Oh yeah, I know. Look at, I mean, Mary and I
be part of my holiday plans.
Oh yeah, well, and I think, Paul, I mean, funny enough, before COVID, Mary and I had this idea that we would go in our motorhome around all the sheds in Donegal, and I have a lot of different equipment, GoPro equipment, etc. So, for example, 2 years ago, we were in a shed in West Cork, and I made a little video with the guys about their shed, and they were magic. And I said, all we would need is a parking place for the night, a place to empty our toilet. We don't even need electricity because we're in solar power, and we would have loved to do so. We anticipate, like you, that there's a new world and new friends and opportunities. And I think in the sheds in general, we've met that because almost there's a filtering process here. If you're the sort of guy who'll engage in this thing, you've pre-selected the sort of people who you would enjoy the company of. And wow, isn't it wonderful? So look, we leave this for now. Hopefully, Paul, I can see these conversations can spread, develop. We'll see you soon at one of our tea and chat sessions or over in the guys. And isn't it great when you wake up on a Wednesday morning? So, I'm going to go to Nairn in Scotland this morning, just like I'm going to go down the street, you know?
Exactly.
All right, so I'll just kill the recording here first, Paul. And yeah.